tutorial video, I will talk about the creation and customization of box and whisker plots in KIWI Explorer. Box and whisker plots, also called box plots, show the distribution of continuous variables for specific values of categorical variables. Box plot profiles are fairly simple and offer a limited number of options. In this video, I will illustrate the selection of the continuous and categorical variables included in the box plots. I will talk about the organization of the folders in the navigation tree, and I will make a quick note about the importance of data formatting in box plots. I have opened KIWI Explorer and the Profile Manager for a single dataset called subset_demo.csv. This dataset is a population pharmacokinetic dataset that we have used in previous tutorials. I will start this demonstration by showing the result of the execution of the global profile for box plots. The global profile is the default profile where all the settings are set to default. For our particular data file, the global profile created 3 different subfolders, one for age, one for creatinine clearance, and one for weight. If I click on the age folder, you can see a box plot showing the distribution of age versus gender, a second box plot showing the distribution of age versus panel, a third one age versus treatment, and a last one showing the distribution of age versus study. If I clicked on the other 2 subfolder, you will see the same 4 box plots showing the distribution of creatinine clearance or weight against the same categorical variable. So the reason why these plots have been created is because when we look at the variable definition panel for the global profile, the definition in the covariables panel, the definition of variables is basically set to a single row set to all covariables. When this all covariables selection is made, KIWI will interrogate the database and will try to find what variables in the selected data file were categorized as continuous or categorical in the configure variable categorization menu. In this case, we have this little table showing up listing all the variables in the data set. Some variables were listed at CO, indicating a continuous variable, so that would be age, creatinine clearance, and weight. Other variables were set as CA for categorical variables, study, SEXF, panel, and this GTRT variable, which was the treatment variable. So knowing this list of continuous and categorical variable, by default KIWI Explorer will create 1 box plot per combination of continuous and categorical variable, and you end up with 1 folder for each continuous variable, and within each folder you have 1 box plot per categorical variable. That's the default behavior of KIWI Explorer for box plot. You can actually customize this list of variable, which is what I've done in the second. This is actually the first custom profile. In this case, I only see 2 folders. One is called age, the second is called estimated GFR. And for each of these subfolder, we only have two box plots, one for age versus gender and one for age versus study. So we have a smaller set of continuous variable and a smaller set of categorical variable. If I go to the profile manager and open the variable definition, in the covariables I had set 4 variables: age, CRCL, SEXF, and study. The first 2 variables were set as continuous, and the last 2 were set as categorical, so they were not continuous, which is equivalent to saying that those variables were categorical. So with this selection of 2 continuous and 2 categorical variables, you end up with the 2 subfolders for each, one for each continuous variable, and in each subfolder you had 1 box plot per categorical variables. Just a note about the effect of setting a custom label in this third column of the covariables panel. This is a label that will be used in the title of the or the name of the subfolder, and also on the y-axis of the box plot. If you let a label to default, KIWI will extract the information about the label and units potentially from the default library of labels and units, which you can visualize or and modify in this configure menu and by selecting the variables, labels, and units. And you can see that for age we had a custom label and a custom unit. I don't think I had anything for weight. Yes, weight had a default label and a default unit, which was used in the global profile. Another note that I want to make at this point is that whenever you create custom box plots, you need to think about the data subset that will be used to create the box plot. The default behavior of KIWI Explorer is to use the entire content of your dataset, so all the records in your dataset. When you're exploring the relationship between continuous and categorical variable, it is quite typical in a pharmacometrics analysis, at least, to subset your data to the first record per subject when you're dealing with time invariant covariate. And to do that, you need to go to the data subset and select or set the keep field to first record per subject. We have created a separate tutorial describing the functionality of all those fields, all the fields of the data subset panel. I invite you to watch this tutorial to learn more about how to use the different fields here and how these would affect the subset of data that is used in your box plots. So, as I said in my introduction, the box plot profiles are fairly simple, and there's only a limited number of options. The selection of variable being one. The second is the control of the whiskers. The default of the whisker is to extend to 1.5 the interquartile range, which is this the difference between the third quartile, which is the upper limit of the box, and the first quartile, which is the lower limit of the box. So the whiskers here extend to the last measured value that is equal or lower than or equal to the third quartile plus 1.5 times this interquartile ratio, and the lower whiskers extend to the latest, the smallest value that is within the interval delimited by the first quartile, and the first quartile minus 1.5, the IQR, or the interquartile range. You have the ability to extend these notches to the minimum and maximum value. So it's not necessarily something that you would see here, but for the EGFR, here you can see one data point that was outside this default interval of the whiskers based upon the 1.5 times the IQR. In the same similar profile in which I have set the whiskers to extend to the minimum and maximum, you can see that now the whiskers just extend up to this data point that was shown in the previous profile. So to do that, I had to go to the basic settings of the whiskers, the basic settings of the box plot profile, and I had to set my whisker limits to min to max. The default is 1.5 times IQR. So this will change the definition of the whiskers. Closing that. Another thing that you can actually do is to, instead of showing the data point outside of the or above or below the whisker limits, you can display the subject identification number, and by you need to set the first field of the advanced setting panel to true. So if you say subject ID for extreme values, if you set this field to true, you would replace the symbol by an actual subject identification number. So those are the two main customization options that you can provide. I want to make a quick note about the organization of the folders. By default, if you are not using any kind of stratification, you will get one folder per continuous variable. If you use a certain type of stratification, you may end up with one folder per continuous and categorical variable. And this the situation in which this type of folder organization is implemented is when you're using a conditioning variable. So in this case, I set panel as a conditioning variable, and in this case you get a set of plot for each panel level. In this case, I got my distribution of age versus gender for panel 1, the same for panel 2, and the same for panel 3. And also by default, you get a combined plot where the paneling is ignored. So if you use one or more conditioning variable, you will end up with this type of organization. The other types of stratification strategy will not affect this organization. So you can use either stratification variable for inter-page stratification. You can even use a grouping variable, in this case different symbols. You would break the data within a panel by some grouping variable, and each box will have a different symbol. We've created a separate videos that describe in more detail the functionality of stratification. This functionality is shared across plot types, so I invite you again to watch the separate videos tutorial to learn more about the stratification functionality. Before I conclude this presentation, I want to make a point about data formatting. We mentioned that in a separate video. Boxplot is probably the type of EDA profile in which data formatting is the most useful. Here you can see that we've used the sexf variable that had the gender label, but the value of the sexf variable were numerical, 0 and 1. You don't really convey a lot of information with a 0 and a 1, and data formatting allow you to transform this numerical information into text-based information. This is done by the creation of a variable collection through the configure format collection button, and then in the data formatting profile, which is the next one that I want to illustrate, I went and set the first field of the data settings panel to an actual format collection. The default of KIWI Explorer is not to apply a format collection. If you have defined a format collection, you can set it here. And the result is the transformation of your of the numerical value 0, 1 into male and female for gender. In the case of the study variable, without application of data formatting, my study variable was 1, 2, and 3. After application of data formatting, I end up with something a little bit more descriptive: phase 1 SD, phase 1 MD, and phase 2. So we have a separate tutorial describing how you can define format collection and apply the format collection onto specific variables. I invite you to watch this video to learn more about that functionality and apply that to Boxplot. So this concludes our presentation of the creation and customization of Boxplot in KIWI Explorer. Thank you.